Around 1700 BCE, Adiris is born. When she is 5, she is left on the steps of the Temple of Purgation at the center of Babylon. To process her shock at her abandonment, she looked to the gods. During this time, a man named Haban becomes her mentor and father figure. She cares for Haban greatly. Adiris dedicates her life to the gods, aiding priests as she grew older, in things such as purification rituals. Haban soon admits that he has wasted his life serving gods that don't exist, and wishes Adiris leave Babylon with him. Adiris hears a whisper and kills Haban, choosing her faith. A plague soon surfaces in Babylon, and the priests contract it, becoming too weak to perform the rituals, leaving them to Adiris. As Adiris begins her first ritual, a woman collapses. Adiris saw blisters covering her feet, and without hesitation severed her own toe, offering it to the gods to save the woman. She is soon revered by the people, and is later named High Priestess of Babylon. The plague soon affects her too, and Adiris begins wearing a veil, and carries around a censer to mask her smell. As the plague only worsens, Adiris leaves the city with a few loyal followers, collapsing of exhaustion in a cave. She gives a final plea to her gods to save her people, in return for her own servitude. A god answers her plea, but not the one she hoped for. In 1602, twins Charlotte and Victor Desai are born to Madeleine Desai in Marseille, France. People are shocked to find upon their birth that the two twins are conjoined. Afraid that there is some kind of witchcraft involved, people begin to hunt the three of them. In 1607, Madeleine falls ill, and Charlotte is left to protect her mother and Victor. After midnight, a witch hunting mob finds them, burning their mother. Charlotte and Victor are sold off to the Black Veil, a cult who experiments on them. Soon they manage to escape, but Victor dies in the process, leaving Charlotte to travel and survive alone for many years, doing all she can to survive. In 1625, Charlotte sits by a campfire during a cold Marseille winter. Charlotte is on the brink of death when Victor miraculously bursts from her chest and onto the ground, and then running into a fog. She follows him and swears to protect him. In 1802, Talbot Grimes is born in Scotland. As a boy, he is popular, bright, and charismatic. One day he explores the fields near his town, becoming ill after experimenting with a poisonous patch of foxglove. He is bedridden for days, but fascinated by the effects of a single flower. In 1815, Kazan is born to Renjiro Yamaoka on the Yamaoka family estate. Renjiro is a famed samurai with a well-respected reputation. In 1820, Talbot moves to London to study at the London School of Medicine, where he began to develop some questionable methods. In 1832, Talbot finds recruitment as a chemist with the British East India Company on an island off the coast of India named Dyer Island. He is tasked with the development of a serum that will allow people to resist higher degrees of pain. In 1839, the First Opium War breaks out. Talbot becomes head chemist and begins receiving captured prisoners from the war as subjects to experiment on. Caleb Quinn is born in the American Midwest, a child of Irish immigrants. In 1843, after the war comes to an end, Talbot is traveling to Mangalore when he is struck with a pipe and thrown into a mass grave of all those that his serum killed. He is devastated by what he has done. Before long, he is saved by an ancient school, pretending to be a monastery. They ask him for assistance in searching for other dimensions, with use of his knowledge of chemicals. In 1845, Kazan is now a man, with his very own son, named Akito. Kazan is not happy though, and has desires to surpass his father's reputation. Seeing the samurai culture begin to thin, with posers appearing, Kazan decides he will rid Japan of imposter samurai. Renjiro requests he look to more noble pursuits than this. Kazan takes his father's katana and leaves. For the following years he kills hundreds throughout Japan, leading a noble lord to give him the name Oni Yamaoka. This angers Kazan more, and he continues killing, stopped only by another true samurai. He fights the samurai, killing him, and discovers it is his father. He screams in rage. In 1849, Caleb begins to tinker with his father's tools. His father gives him a wrench. Caleb's inventions quickly go from quaint to deadly, as he plans out traps made to hurt the boys who bullied him. In 1850, the ancient school soon becomes disturbed by Talbot's strange methods, leading Talbot to continue his search alone for the soul chemical, returning to Dyer Island. He carves his research into the walls of a cave, and then into himself. Orange flowers appear, and a fog consumes him. Later that year, Kazan locates the lord who called him Oni Yamaoka. He rips his tongue out and kills waves of his people, before being overwhelmed and left to die in a stone mill. On the brink of death, and his family reputation tarnished, a fog consumes him. In 1860, Caleb is working for a man named Henry Bayshore, Caleb's inventions landing him great favor with Bayshore. However, when Caleb discovers that Bayshore is selling on his inventions, he snaps and beats him bloody, plowing a railroad spike through him and nailing him to his desk. Caleb is sent to Hellshire Penitentiary as a result. In 1875, Caleb is released from Hellshire Penitentiary after befriending the warden. The warden allows Caleb to leave, but only if he fills the prison with more outlaws. Caleb formed a gang and got to work. He invents the spear gun and earns the name Deathslinger after shooting a man's intestines out. In 1881, Caleb storms Hellshire Penitentiary with assistance from his gang after discovering that Caleb's former boss, Henry Bayshore, has purchased the prison. They capture and throw both the warden and Bayshore to a mob. Caleb returns to his old cell as a fog invites him to walk a dusty path of revenge. He leaves Nebraska. In 1886, Sally is born in the US. In 1887, Elliot Spencer is born in England. In 1892, Anna is born and raised in the Red Forest. In 1896, in the town of Weeks, Evan is born to wealthy landowner Archie McMillan, owner of the McMillan estate. Evan is still young when his mother and uncle die at the hand of Archie. In 1897, Anna is a young child when her mother throws herself in front of an elk to save Anna. She dies as a result. Anna continues to live in the woods alone, surviving off of the Red Forest. In 1906, Evan is now a young boy. He is creative and caring like his mother. Evan sees how his father treats the McMillan workers, with a harsh iron fist. A growing resentment and doubt develops towards him. In 1907, Sally marries a man named Andrew Smithson, who works as a lumberjack. They soon move to a new town and live a happy life, with Andrew building them both a home. In 1910, with Anna now an adult, she begins to raid villages nearby to the Red Forest. She kills everyone, aside the young girls, who she takes back to her cabin. She fastens them to a wall with a rope to make sure they don't escape. Then she finds them toys, dolls, and storybooks, but they all eventually die of cold, starvation, or sickness anyway. In 1911, Sally's husband dies in a work accident. With no other option, she is forced to work at the nearby Crotus-Pren Asylum. When the Great War breaks out in 1914, the Red Forest begins to have squadrons of German troops move through it. Anna reacts by killing them, looting their bodies as she does. Sally begins to work as a military nurse during the war. Elliot Spencer joins the British Army, serving in France as a captain. After participating in a battle, he loses faith in humanity. He soon became jaded and disillusioned, living a pleasure-filled lifestyle. He finds the lament configuration in British India and becomes a Cenobite after solving it. In 1918, with the war now over, Anna is taken by the entity from the Red Forest. The circumstances of her abduction are unknown. In 1919, the Macmillan workers prepare to go on strike for better working conditions and wages. Evan sides with the workers and cares for them. However, they soon sell him out to his father. Evan becomes disgusted by them and gains respect for his father. He becomes his enforcer and does whatever deed his father tells him. In 1921, Sally becomes influenced by the words of a Crotus-Pren patient, nicknamed the Broken Woman. Sally begins to become disgusted by the weakness she witnesses daily and begins killing patients secretly. In 1926, William Bill Overbeck is born in Fairfield, Pennsylvania. In 1930, Evan McMillan leads over 100 of his workers into the Macmillan mines, sealing them inside. Later he locks up his father, leaving him in the basement of the estate storehouse to die. Evan is then taken by the entity. In 1931, after working 2 decades at Crotus-Pren, Sally snaps, murdering over 50 people. Sally is taken into an ambulance, after she is discovered to be the only survivor of the massacre. The ambulance mysteriously crashes, and Sally is missing. In 1932, Kenneth Chase is born. At a young age, Kenneth begins to kill animals, mostly birds, and collects their feathers. In 1935, Carmina Mora is born in Chile. In 1938, Bubba Sawyer is born in Muerto County, Texas. In 1942, Herman Carter is born in the US. On October 31st, 1947, Sadako Yamamura is born, daughter of famed seer from Izuoshima, Japan. In 1950, Ace Visconti is born in Argentina. In 1951, Boy is born, the son of Max and Evelyn Thompson, the owners of Coldwind Farm. Ashamed of his disfigured appearance, they lock him away. In 1951, after her mother leaves, Carmina becomes the caretaker of her younger brother, Matthias, while she is still a child. A year later in 1952, Carmina is painting outside. She goes inside to answer the phone. When she comes back out, Matthias is gone, her father uncaring. She soon finds Matthias, dead in a nearby creek. Filled with sadness, she goes to a bridge, planning to jump from it, when a flock of crows fills the sky. One lands on her shoulder and stares at her. The crows soon flocked her, seemingly caring for her well-being. She no longer felt alone, and returned home, picking up her paintbrush. In 1954, a young man goes missing in Kenneth Chase's town, murdered by Kenneth. Soon enough, his father finds the finger of the man, which Kenneth has kept, and so Kenneth flees and joins the traveling circus, changing his name to Jeffrey Hawk, and stealing a ringmaster's costume and caravan. Whilst with the circus, he begins killing, and engaging with unhealthy habits of drinking, drugs, and junk food, taking whatever he needs, when he needs it. David Tapp is born. Carmina begins to paint large, tragic murals, in grandiose costumes, expanding her art form. Wherever she went, crows followed. In 1955, the Vietnam War begins, and Bill Overbeck is sent to Vietnam. Sybil Bennett is born in Brahms, Maine. In 1956, Boy is abused by his parents, scolded with hot water, beat, and neglected in his small dark room, left only with a TV to stop his screaming. When Boy grows, they force him to kill animals, due to his high strength. His parents show the police, sheriff, and deputies his strength also, who they are secretly working with to launder money. In 1957, Michael Myers is born in the town of Haddonfield, Illinois. Philip Ajomo is born in Nigeria. When he is young, his father gifts him a bell. Ashley Joanna Williams is born on April 8, 1957, in Elk Grove, Michigan. Lisa Garland is born. In 1961, Laurie Strode is born in the town of Haddonfield, Illinois. Freddy Krueger is born in Springwood, Ohio. In 1962, Kate Denson is born in Pennsylvania. In 1963, a 6-year-old Michael Myers murders his sister, Judith. He is studied by a doctor named Samuel Loomis for the next 15 years, who decides he is purely and simply evil. Danny Johnson is born. In 1964, James Sunderland is born. In 1966, Steve Harrington is born in the town of Hawkins, Indiana. Sadako is hit over the head and thrown down a well. After her powers appear too strong, she attempts to crawl out, but can't. In 1967, the Nigerian Civil War begins. Philip loses both his parents during the war, and further his grandmother. Left alone, he stumbles on in search of help, finding a woman named Fananya, who attempts to give him hope. Despite this, she is soon tortured and killed also. Philip blames himself for her death, as he didn't ring his bell to alert them of soldiers approaching. This enrages Philip, who finds the people who killed her, burning them alive. In this same year, in Hawkins, Indiana, Nancy Wheeler is born. Later that year, Jonathan Byers is born in Hawkins, Indiana. In 1968, Ace moves to Las Vegas, Nevada. He gambles, scams, seduces, and smooth talks his way to a life of luxury, although money often slips through his fingers. But he always figures he can win back more. In 1969, Amanda Young is born. The Nigerian Civil War ends in January 1970. At the age of 8, Kate becomes skilled with a guitar, performing in front of crowds, starting in Pennsylvania, then across the South to Nashville. She wins a series of folk music competitions and talent shows, the better she gets. In 1970, Carmina sparks a large-scale surrealist movement through her performances. Later that year, Herman, now a promising doctor, is recruited by the CIA for a secret project at a CIA black site named Larry's Memorial Institute in Michaelstown, Illinois. Herman leads a search into experimental techniques of extracting information from prisoners. He develops a love for electricity and becomes known as the Doctor. In 1972, Boy becomes a man. He gets tired of the abuse, taking a hammer and chainsaw and murdering both his parents, the police sheriff, and many deputies, further slaughtering the remainder of the animals on Coldwind Farm, giving himself the name Max Thompson Jr. after his father. He lives lives on the farm until the surrounding areas become suspicious. When it is later investigated, Max Thompson Jr. is gone. On August 18th in 1973, Bubba Sawyer is taken by the entity, after killing multiple teenagers who entered onto his property, this event becoming known as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Chris Redfield is born. In 1974, Jill Valentine is born. In 1975, the Vietnam War ends. Bill Overbeck returns home. During the war, he suffered an injury to his knee from some shrapnel, causing permanent damage. Carmina draws the attention of the VAC label with her renown, a multinational enterprise who commission her to paint a mural. VAC label is full of corruption though, and Carmina sought to expose it. She painted the mural they commissioned, but made VAC label's logo into a grim reaper harvesting fields of Chilean families. The piece struck a debate about corruption. It soon painted a target on Carmina's back. One night she is kidnapped, along with her friends, out in the desert. The people who kidnapped her are the Black Veil. The cult members cut out Carmina's tongue and severed her hands, asking how she would recite poems and paint now. Crows suddenly appeared, attacking the cult members. Soon enough they began to attack Carmina's friends also, killing them. Carmina feels it is her fault. Darkness fell over Carmina, and a fog engulfed her. In 1976, Lisa Garland, now a nurse at Alchemilla Hospital in Silent Hill, starts treating Alessia Gillespie. She is blackmailed by a cult, exploited for her drug addiction. Soon after, she is taken by the entity. In 1977, Frank Morrison is born in Calgary, Alberta. Leon S. Kennedy is born. On October 31st in 1978, Michael Myers breaks free after being transported to another prison, going on a murdering spree in the town of Haddonfield, before finally disappearing after he is shot by Loomis. His fate unknown, but his murders remembered. Laurie Strode barely escapes Myers in this same night. She too also mysteriously disappears. Julie Kostenko, Jeff Johansson, Susie and Joey are all born in the town of Ormond. In 1979, Claire Redfield is born. In 1980, Philip has moved to the US, gaining employment at a scrapyard named Autohaven Wreckers. Here he crushes cars and suspects his boss is up to something illegal. Philip doesn't care, as long as he isn't involved. Kate, now an adult, tours the country after buying a Chevy truck. She meets many people and performs in many places, gaining fame as a musician, her favorite place being a quiet hollow, encircled by trees. One day when looking for inspiration, she walks in the woods. She sees a pulsing light emanating from a nearby cave and investigates. She falls down the cave and is nearly grabbed by the entity, but manages to resist its claws, escaping safely. Ash encounters evil for the first time in 1982, after going to a cabin in the woods with some friends and finding the Necronomicon. Herman is taken by the entity in May 1983, after massacring the patients and staff of Larry's Memorial Institute. Later that year, the government destroys it through planned explosive demolition, covering up the remains of Herman Carter's work. Sybil Bennett, now a police officer, meets Harry Mason in Silent Hill and agrees to help him find his missing daughter. She is later taken by the entity from Silent Hill. Frank, at the age of 6, feels very angry with the world after he is abandoned at birth, and lives a life traveling from family to family as he lives his childhood in foster care. Heather Mason is born in Silent Hill. In June 1984, whilst operating the crusher on a car, Philip sees blood seeping from it. He opens the boot of the car to find a man. His boss, Azarov, walks over, killing the man, before confessing that every car Philip has crushed contained a person. Philip is enraged, killing his boss, and ripping out his skull and spine. When police later investigate the wrecker's yard, a strange fog is seen, and Philip is gone. During November 1984, pursuing a lead, Nancy enters the Hawkins National Laboratory, calling Steve Harrington for backup, before suddenly losing consciousness, waking up in a completely new place. After Steve receives a phone call for assistance from Nancy, he drives to the laboratory, finding only her notebook. The ground opens beneath him, and mist fills his eyes. Concurrently to these events, in Russia, the Demogorgon is taken by the entity from its cell. During this time, across America, the normal-appearing man, Danny Johnson, begins moving from town to town, getting employment at local papers, writing for them, getting jobs easily, wherever he wants with his friendly and upbeat attitude. His normal front allowed him to meticulously stalk and kill people throughout the towns he worked in, then bragging about his own deeds within the paper, providing images of the murders, which he would take himself. Danny slowly built a narrative around the Ghostface Killer. Jane Romero is born to famous actress, Loretta Lawrence. Her parents separate when she is young, and she is raised by her father. Her mother is never around, but Jane admires her presence on screen. Some time has passed after the disappearance of Steve and Nancy, when Jonathan, too, is pulled into the entity's realm. In 1985, one of Jeffrey's victims breaks free from their bindings. The clown flees once more, and is never seen again, invited into the realm by the entity. At the same time, Kate is taken by the entity, whilst playing her guitar in her favorite spot. In 1986, Jonah Vasquez is born in Fresno, California. In 1987, Felix Richter is born in Coburg, Germany, to Janos and Ursula Richter, two well-respected physicians and members of an ancient society. Elodie Rocoto is born into a lush Parisian household. Her parents are also members of an ancient society. Pinhead is summoned by Kirsty Cotton, unintentionally. She is spared in exchange for giving up her uncle, Frank Cotton, who had previously escaped the Cenobites. Pinhead gets Frank, but Kirsty banishes him and the other Cenobites back to their realm. In 1988, Adam Francis is born in Rollington Town, Jamaica. In 1990, Adam's father dies in a car crash when he is just 2. His uncle takes him in. His uncle is strict but fair, and raises him to value education. Yoichi Asakawa is born in Japan. In 1991, Quinton Smith is born in Springwood, Ohio. Dwight Fairfield is born in the US. Decades after Sadako was thrown down the well, a resort is built above it. After a visitor rents a cabin, Sadako takes her revenge, summoning her powers and projecting a curse onto a videotape that would kill its viewer after 7 days. The entity finds Sadako in her well. It lifts her from it with a tidal wave and destroys the cabin above. She made an agreement with the fog and walked into a coming wave. In 1992, Zarina Kassir is born in Brooklyn, New York, growing up in a Lebanese household. Pyramid Head is spawned from the tortured mind of James Sunderland in 1993 in Silent Hill. He is a manifestation of his guilt and the desire for punishment, taking on the look of the executioners of Silent Hill's past. The Pyramid Head hunts and stalks James throughout Silent Hill, reminding him of his guilt until he faces up to it and repents. After completing his goal, Pyramid Head enters the long rest. Soon after, the entity seeks Pyramid Head out, inviting him into the realm. He goes, fulfilling his duty. The entity then later finds and also takes James Sunderland. On June 18th, 1993, Danny Johnson, known as Jed Olson in the town of Roseville, Florida, prepares to leave after admitting to a string of murders he committed, disguised as the Ghostface. As he stares upon a wall of articles covering his murders, a fog consumes him. David King is born in Manchester, in the UK, to a rich family. In 1994, Yoon Jin Lee is born in South Korea, to a life of hardship. From a young age, she develops a passion for the sound of music. In 1995, Jake Park is born to a rich family in Connecticut. In 1996, 19-year-old Frank Morrison arrives in the town of Ormond, making friends with a girl named Julie, who shares his strange and twisted ideals of the world, and his love for serial killers. Julie introduces her friends Susie and Joey, and together they form a group named the Legion, using the abandoned ski resort up Mount Ormond as their headquarters. Frank commissions Jeff to paint a Legion mural in the abandoned Mount Ormond ski resort. He pays him a $50 bill and a 12-pack of beer. Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield are recruited into STARS, a special law enforcement unit in Raccoon City. Later in 1996, after Joey is fired by his boss for apparently stealing, Frank gets angry and demands they get some kind of revenge on his workplace and old boss. They go to the store where Joey worked, planning to vandalize it, but they are met by a cleaner who witnesses their crimes. Frank stabs him, Julie also, forcing the other two to take the knife and stab him too. They drag the body up Mount Ormond and bury him there, wandering off into a strange fog, never to be seen again. Jeff moves to Winkler, Manitoba with his mother, miles away from his hometown. Whilst attending Badham Preschool, Quentin is subjected to Freddy Krueger's abuse, later forgetting these events. As a result, Quentin's and the other children's parents burn Krueger to death. Feng Min is born in China. From a young age, she loves computer games, despite her parents not seeing a future in them. In 1997, Claudette Morel is born in Montreal, Canada. Meg Thomas is born in Colorado. Jane begins to get into acting. She auditions for plays, commercials, and helps her father at a studio. By 1997, both of Yoichi's parents die to a mysterious curse in Izuoshima. In 1998, Nia Carlson is born in Yo, Sweden. Lisa Sherwood is born in a secluded village isolated from civilization. When she is young, she begins reading books owned by her grandmother about magic and hexes. Yui Kimura is born in Hida, Japan. Yui's grandparents encourage her love for motorcycles, and her grandfather gives her his is Good Luck Hachimaki. On September 28, 1998, both Jill Valentine and the bioweapon Nemesis are taken by the entity from Raccoon City in the midst of a zombie outbreak. On September 29th, Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield are taken by the entity after entering the Nest Lab beneath Raccoon City while searching for a cure for the zombie outbreak. Chris Redfield is taken by the entity whilst in Europe, investigating Umbrella. Ji-Woon Hak is born in South Korea to a father who wanted him to succeed where he hadn't. In 1999, Jeff gets involved in a fight at a concert, nearly blinding himself in the process. He reassesses his life choices, going back to art school. Rin Yamaoka is born in the Yamaoka family residence in Kagawa, Japan. During the year 2000, Heather Mason goes to Silent Hill to kill a woman named Claudia. Heather fights through Silent Hill, finding Claudia. Claudia consumes a fetus that Heather vomits up. Claudia then births a god. Heather defeats it, taking on the name of Cheryl. Michaela Reed is born. Michaela loves her father, who takes her on sailing lessons and makes her tacos. In 2001, Cheryl receives a strange phone call whilst working for a crisis intervention center. She answers the call. It's Claudia. Soon after, she becomes nauseous, and a fog consumes her. At the age of 14, Elodie and Felix meet on Dyer Island, a private island exclusive to members of the Imperiati. Their parents force them to interact and form connections. They had no interest in this though, opting instead to find a group of like-minded teenagers, with no interest in their parents' politics. Together they formed a group named the Pariahs, with 3 others. One evening the Pariahs are exploring Dyer Island, and discover an abandoned internment camp from the Opium War. There was an underground laboratory, filled with strange apparatuses, and scratches on the walls. Suddenly the ground shook, and claws broke through the concrete floor. The Imperiati rushed in to protect the children. The children ran, and the Imperiati were never seen again. In 2002, Jane lands a part-time job at a radio station. Jonah's family is poor, and as he gets older, his father begins to provide for them, working his way from a fruit picker to owning a small mangrove. Using the money he earns, he gets Jonah an education. Jonah begins to love numbers and complex equations. On his 16th birthday, in an unaddressed card, Jonah receives a string of mysterious numbers. He tried all he could to solve them, but to no avail. In 2003, Jeff leaves art school. He gets a desk job and designs labels for microbreweries, leading a quiet, simple life. He takes in a rescue dog and brews beer, designing tattoos and freelance album covers for bands. In 2004, recovering drug addict Amanda Young is kidnapped and placed into a trial, where she is tasked with retrieving a key to release the reverse bear trap on her head. In order to obtain the key, she has to find it within the stomach of the other person contained within her cell, which she does, resulting in their death. After this experience, Amanda values her life and joins the person who put her in the trial, John Kramer, also known as Jigsaw. Later, in 2004, Detective David Tapp, after being discharged from the police after his partner's death, begins to investigate the Jigsaw killer alone. He sees someone in the window of Dr. Lawrence Gordon's house, a missing person, chasing them down after hearing gunshots. He fights with the man but loses, taking a bullet to the chest. As he dies, he is taken into the realm. In 2005, Claudette receives a science set for her 8th birthday, her father encouraging her interests. Jane becomes the new host of failing talk show, Quick Talk. In 2006, Amanda continues helping Jigsaw to conduct more trials, but eventually becomes misguided, and begins to make the trials impossible to survive for those who are placed in them. This results in her eventually getting shot. She is slowly bleeding to death when she finds herself in an unfamiliar place. In 2007, Jane launches her own show named The Jane Romero Show, which is broadcast nationally. The show breaks records, and her name becomes well known. Jane writes books, starts fashion lines, and creates beauty creams. In 2008, after their old classmates begin dying, Quentin Smith and Nancy Holbrook investigate the death of a preschool groundskeeper, Freddy Krueger. They both fall in and out of microsleeps, haunted by Krueger in their dreams. They reach their old preschool, and discover the crawl space where evidence of Krueger's abuse is found. They formulate a plan, and kill him. Later that year, Quentin Smith, and the actually still alive Freddy Krueger, are taken by the entity, just before Freddy tries to kill Quentin as revenge for killing him. Seeing reports of injustice, Zarina becomes inspired to seek the truth. She borrowed her father's camera, and posted content online, building a loyal following over the next few years. After hearing about a restaurant exploiting workers, Zarina goes undercover to expose them. Her story reaches the news, but the restaurant got sympathy for it. Zarina was embittered, and was now committed to be an independent filmmaker, where she could relay the truth. Felix Felix and Elodie grow apart, after making little sense of their parents' disappearance. In 2009, a zombie outbreak occurs. In the Pennsylvania city of Fairfield, overrun by zombies, Bill Overbeck sacrifices himself to turn on a generator to save his group of survivors. Moments before his death, at the hands of multiple tanks, Bill is taken by the entity. In 2010, Nia moves to Fall City in the US. Zarina's world is turned upside down when a surveillance video shows her father getting pushed into a moving car. The man who had done it, Clark Stevenson, had a gang. Zarina investigated the gang, determined to shed light on their crimes, even talking to Clark himself, who was locked up in Nebraska, in Hellshire Penitentiary. From her interview, she created a tribute film to her father that gained her international acclaim. Felix Richter is considered an architectural prodigy by 23, winning multiple prestigious awards, and establishing an architectural firm named Richter & Golder. Despite his success, he still felt like a phony. In 2011, David gets into rugby due to his family connections, and he soon becomes a promising star. However, his temper leads him to assault a referee, earning him a lifetime ban from the league, cutting his career short. At 17, Yoonjin obtains an internship at Mighty One Studios. After they visit her high school, Jonah graduates university and is hired as a codebreaker by the CIA. He sets to work on deciphering. He is soon moved to a covert task force in Quintana, where he decoded messages from rebels, his work enabling the US to target numerous locations. It was discovered soon that the messages were decoys, and there had been many civilian casualties as a result. Seeing the damage he had done, Jonah took a leave of absence. He then decided to infiltrate the rebels' computers, moving money to those affected by the bombings. Soon enough, gunshots ran through his suite, and holes through his walls. He broke his window and ran into the American embassy. Once he finally returned to his desk work, the mysterious numbers appeared again, after he deciphered a code. In 2012, Dwight begins working at Peak 22 as a story hook supervisor. He doesn't quite know what his job title means, but he gets paid well, so he doesn't care. His boss Lazar is horrible though, and so Dwight spikes his coffee with a hallucinogen, tricked by a co-worker into thinking it was something harmless. It nearly leads to his boss killing someone. Free from the constraints of a career, and enabled by his family's wealth, David spends most of his time at the pub, drinking, watching games, and getting into fights, briefly spending some time as a bare-knuckle fighter, and also debt collector. Yoichi graduates from a university in Tokyo, with top honors in marine biology, and then becoming the youngest professor in the school's history. When two of his students disappear in Izuoshima, he investigates. He remembers Sadako, and falls into a frenzy. In 2013, Jake leaves the wealth of his family, living out in the woods alone. Adam Francis moves to Kagoshima, Japan, becoming a teacher after graduating university. Yoonjin produces some of Mighty One's biggest hits, under the name Magnum Opus. Soon she became the producer of failing band No Spin. She recruited a new member to the band, Ji-Woon Hak. Within hours of their first video, they were viral. In 2014, Meg wins the Colorado State Championships in the 100-meter sprint, breaking her ankle in the process. She soon quits running and cares for her mother, who becomes ill. Claudette earns an early scholarship to a great college. Excelling in science, she leaves Montreal. Feng joins the Laser Bears esports team. Leaving home, she becomes well known in the gaming world. Nicknamed Shining Lion, she live streams and competes in esports events. At the age of 16, Nia begins to tag. No Spin's success was cut short when the members of No Spin were consumed by a studio fire, the only survivor being Ji-Woon, who had left them to die after enjoying the sounds of their screams. Yoonjin helped to build Ji-Woon's new solo act, The Trickster, using the tragedy of No Spin's death to her advantage. During this time, Ji-Woon used his fame to begin killing, using the screams of those he killed in his songs. In 2015, Nia tags the car of the Fall City mayor, after discovering he is hoarding the city's fresh water supply. This leads him to chase her down, while she flees on a skateboard. He crashes and dies. Lisa begins to use hexes herself, despite her grandmother warning against it. Lisa's friend Pam wants to use them too, after Lisa manages to use a hex for extra luck on a test. After Pam uses the hexes to raise her own grades, she is killed at a funeral, in a freak accident, where a coffin is dropped, crushing her. Since the disappearance of the Imperiati, Elodie dedicated her time to figuring out what had happened to them. Her research pushed her into the fields of dark occultism. She began working for someone named the Collector, finding artifacts for them. On one occasion, she finds the annals of a trial convicting a mother birthing conjoined twins in the 17th century. Ash accidentally releases the Kandarian demon after reading the Necronomicon. Rin's father makes her take kendo lessons. She hates the classes, and she gets bullied, being called Janitor Yamaoka. When fighting one of the boys, she finds a rage within her, beating him. When they find her after class, she beats them again, releasing her inner Yamaoka, feeling connected to her ancestors. In June of 2016, Dwight goes on a work trip into the woods, drinking too much moonshine and passing out. Upon waking, he attempts to hike out of the woods, but never finds his way. Concurrently, Meg is out on a long run in the woods when she is taken by the entity. Also concurrently, Claudette Morel is taking a stroll through the woods, losing her way and getting taken by the entity. Also concurrently, Jake Park gets lost in the woods, taken by the entity, after his compass moves erratically. Yui races older boys in her hometown, beating them in motorbike races, encouraged by her grandmother. Her grandmother teaches her to not just try to win, but to make sure she has friends to share her victories with. When the time came to apply to school, Yui's father condemned her pursuing a career in racing. She was told she was no longer welcome in his home. She left Hida and went to Nagoya, with use of her grandmother's savings. At the age of 16, Michaela loses her father, and is submerged in a painful darkness, led out only by the support of her friends, and her love for crafting stories. In August of 2016, Nia Carlson disappears, after being dared to tag the old Crotus Pren Asylum. In December of 2016, Lisa Sherwood is walking home through the woods, when a storm strikes without warning, the bad weather leading her to slip, and hit her head on a rock. When she awakes, she finds herself locked in a flooded cellar. She soon figures she has been captured by cannibals, after they begin to carve her flesh from her body, slowly withering her down. In her last moments of life, she etches a hex into the wet mud, and as by some miracle, she manages to break free, killing her captors and entering the realm. Ace Visconti is also taken, after amassing a debt he is unable to repay. Feng pushes herself to her limit, the pressure getting to her. She loses sleep, and her performance begins to slip. She spirals out of control, and falls into a pattern of self-destruction, tormented by the idea of failing her parents and fans. In May 2017, after falling blackout drunk in a bar, Feng finds herself in the realm. In July 2017, David is taken by the entity, his friends thinking nothing of his disappearance. Yui becomes well known in Nagoya for her illegal street racing, winning more money than she has ever seen, while still keeping her grandmother's advice in mind. Soon a gang starts following her, but so does a stalker. Coming home one night to her apartment, she found her lucky hachimaki had been stolen. The police dismissed her. Yui returns home, finding her stalker. They fight, and Yui overpowers him. Yui receives a new hachimaki from her gang, now known as the Sakura 7. Through the following years, the gang grows, and Yui continues to race. Touring his solo act in Brazil, the trickster stalks a man, seeking to kill him. However, Yunjin is close behind him, and he has to stage a kidnapping instead, leading to the man's death regardless. Rin begins studying at Takamatsu University. Her father's finances become increasingly shaky as he attempts to keep the estate running. She takes on a job herself at a restaurant. In September 2018, Adam Francis is traveling home from work by train when it suddenly derails. As the train flips, he moves himself in the way of a detached door to protect a girl, to make sure it doesn't hit her. Before it hits him, a fog consumes him. That day, Rin's father is fired from his job after 22 years. Rin Yamaoka arrives home from work to the family residence. Upon arrival, she hears screams, running upstairs to find her mother in pieces. Her father begins attacking her with a katana, slicing her. She falls through a partition and onto the ground. With her last moments of life, she swears an oath to the entity, after it promises her blood and revenge. Ash defeats a full-scale demon by firing the Kandarian dagger at it with a tank. Despite this, the world is overrun by demons. In December 2018, Jeff Johansson receives a call that his father has died. He travels back to Ormond and is soon taken by the entity from the abandoned ski resort up Mount Ormond, by the mural he painted all those years ago. Michaela develops a love for witchcraft and begins practicing blessings and spells. She begins working at the Moonstone as a barista, where she performs her stories live on open mic. In March 2019, Jane Romero interviews her mother, Loretta Lawrence. Loretta claims she is not Jane's mother. Jane is shocked and drives to her father's house in New Jersey for answers. A combination of blurriness from pills she is taking and the icy roads causes Jane's car to flip and fall into a body of water. After investigation, Jane's body is not recovered. In December 2019, Yui Kimura is racing in the illegal Tokyo Kick 3000 street race when a fog appears out of nowhere, consuming her. Felix finds out he is going to be a father from his girlfriend. After years of self-doubt, he is determined to get his life together. As the years go by, Yunjin begins to connect the dots of Jiwoon's murders. In March 2020, Zarina returns to Hellshire. After she is informed of a possible story, she goes to investigate, entering the cell of a previous Irish-born inmate in Hellshire named Mad Mick. Before she is taken, she finds an old rusty wrench hidden inside the wall. In September 2020, Felix returns to Dyer Island to work on a restoration project there. 6 months in, a fog appears, and from it appears Felix's father. His father turns his back on him and walks away. Felix chased him into the fog. In December 2020, Elodie breaks into some catacombs to recover a skull. A Black Veil member chased her in the catacombs. She smashed a loose skull over his head, but he stabs her. As she bled out, she scratched a symbol into the floor. Her vision blurred, and she found what she had been looking for, the realm. In March 2021, Jiwoon gathers the board members of Mighty One, killing them all after they voice their dislike of his new sound. He leaves Yunjin for last, but before he can reach her and kill her, a fog consumes them both. Michaela's roommate Julian records her performance at the Moonstone and sends it to the Endless Halloween Festival, a renowned storytelling performance on Halloween. She is accepted into it. After many sleepless nights of crafting her tale of horror, Michaela dreams of the entity's realm. Scared of sleeping once more, she asks Julian to watch her. During the night, Michaela rises into the air, before a claw bursts into the room, attacking them. The lights turned off, and the claw was gone. Julian disappears the next morning, and Michaela feels she is being watched as she goes to her car. Motivated by the fear, she finishes her story. Yoichi began researching into parapsychology, cryptozoology, and more. Soon enough, he became ridiculed and ostracized, and a liability. The university terminated his position. Yoichi gathers a team of like-minded people. After more disappearances at a lighthouse, and Yoichi's father returning to him as a spirit, he goes to investigate. In September 2021, Dwight Fairfield discovers the lament configuration within the basement, summoning Pinhead into the entity's realm. Pinhead decides to stay. Soon after, seeing the potential for pleasure and pain in the realm, another Cenobite arrives, the Chatterer. On October 31st, 2021, Michaela is engulfed by a fog during her performance at the Endless Halloween Festival. In November of 2021, Jonah decides to finally get to the bottom of the numbers that have haunted him throughout his life. They lead him to a graveyard in Chile. He converted the coordinates as dates, and found the numbers translated to his birthday, the second half, today's date. He discovered the code was about him. A fatigue covered him, and a fog seeped from the grass, swirling toward him. In March 2022, Yoichi, guided by his father's spirit, is led to investigate more mysterious disappearances. This investigation leads Yoichi to take to the sea, believing a darkness is cooling him. Out on the water, the sea becomes violent, and his boat is destroyed. Yoichi finally finds the lighthouse, where there have been many mysterious disappearances. Following his father still, a fog consumes him. In 2028, Ash is taken to a hidden Knights of Sumeria compound and prepared to save humanity. When he awakes, he sees Linda Emery, a previous girlfriend. She seduces him, then cuts Ash's finger. She's really a demon in disguise. She then stabs him repeatedly and begins strangling him. He pokes soap in her eyes and places a knife to the demon's neck. Ash asks the demon to make a deal. He'll let the demon go if he gets back to his friends. The demon began an incantation, and Ash repeated it. He fell through the ground into the realm of the entity.